Hello everyone, and welcome to this sixth episode of Brilliancies by Mikhail. And today we'll be analyzing a game played by Mikhail versus David Bronston in Tbilisi in 1982. So again, as every game of Tal is, it's a feast for us regarding tactics and the plans that Tal has. And in today's game, we will see how Tal kind of positionally dominates his opponent, and that is why I like this game the most. And you will just see why this is one of the masterpiece of Mikhail Tal. So let's dive into the game right away. If you see this position, David has just played pawn to d6 here. Sorry, pawn to d6 here, attacking the knight on e5. And at first, it may seem that the knight on e5 should have a very nice discovery because the rook on e1 is just lined up on the queen. But it turns out that the knight actually doesn't have any lot of discoveries because if knight g6 attacking the rook, simply queen takes on g6 will, leave Tal in a piece down position. So what does Tal do here? Well, Tal finds a very nice plan. So Tal goes for knight to c6. So of course, discover attack on the queen, so you can't take the knight. But what is Tal's plan here? So basically, what Tal wants to force black into is that, well, okay, where do you go with the queen? If you go with queen f5, something like, then knight e7 check, and you just lose the exchange because it is a fork to the king and the queen. So knight e7 check is much more deadly in this case. So you cannot go with queen f5, and except f5, there is not a good square. If queen g6, then the same thing works here for Mikhail Tal. And if not, let's say if queen to g4 is played, the queen is slightly, misplaced on g4. Again, something like knight e7 check will be just enough for Tal to secure a win because the queen is completely misplaced. Even there is no threat on g2 because the white queen nicely guards the g2 square. So okay, after knight c6, the queen cannot go to f5, the queen cannot go to g4. So what should black do with the queen? Well, David places the queen on f7. He says, well, okay, now I'm slightly moving passive, but David has some plans of further activating his queen in after this, what you can say, as the game proceeds. So now again, David asked White a question that, okay, I moved my queen away from the line of the rook. Now your knight is still hanging, and what do you do about it? So if you trade rooks here with White, then this position is completely better for Black because now still the knight is hanging, and the Black rook is in complete control of the e5. So well, you cannot allow Black such a nice position. So what does Tal do? Tal actually comes up with a very brilliant idea. So again, for those who want to pause the video, they can pause. They can because this is a very nice positional idea that Tal plays here. And for those who want to enjoy the show, Tal plays rook to e7. Tal doesn't take the rook, but he just keeps the rook one square away from capturing the black rook. And what is Tal's plan? Tal's actually attacking the queen, and not only is attacking the queen, he's forcing black to capture so that the knight will arrive at the e7 square, which is a much more active square, checking the black king. So Brunson, of course, he captures in the game, but what options did Brunson had? Because capturing does lead to a very nice position for white. Well, again, if you play something like queen to g6, it doesn't work because simply queen d5 check. There are lots and lots of good moves after that, after queen to g6. I think after queen g6, even f5 is a much active idea for white. And if you go with something like queen h5, then again queen d5 check, followed with rook c7 or even rook g7 sacrifice, Tal will be in complete control of the game. So David doesn't want that. David chooses rook captures on e7. You have knight captures on e7, and now comes king to h8. Slightly, that's the only move that Black has practically. And now, how should Tal continue here? Well, Tal has a lot of options to continue. Tal can play rook e1, place the rook on the open file, and Tal can even push his pawn to f5, and Tal chooses that one. So Tal plays pawn to f5, gaining more space. He takes more and more squares into control, and he's basically threatening pawn to f6, trapping the bishop, and that will be just the game for him. Because if after pawn to f6, you cannot even capture because of rook captures on f6, and it's completely winning for white. So how to stop the idea of pawn to f6? Well, David plays bishop to f6 himself here, and this is just offering a trade of bishop. Stahl accepts it. Bishop captures, queen captures. Now the knight is surely under attack, And Tal doesn't have a lot of choices to defend the knight. So Tal cannot go back with knight c6, knight c8, everything is controlled. Knight d5 can be played, but then bishop d5, queen d5, and if you start to analyze the position much more better, you will realize the knight on e7 is much more important than the bishop on b7. So we should not allow a trade like this with knight d5. So Tal chooses for rook e1. Tal says, well, okay, now I'm going to defend my knight. What is your plan? And David plays rook to f7. He says, well, okay, I'm going to increase the pressure on the knight because your knight cannot move on c8 and c6. And if you go to d5, I will again trade the knight for the bishop. And it is still better for Tal. I think it's slightly advantage. The engine shows slightly advantage for white. But from human point of view, after queen f5, it is close to a draw here. So Tal, of course, doesn't want to allow that, and Tal counters with a very nice tactic here. Tal plays rook to e6, and Tal says, "Well, okay, you can capture with the rook, but now I'm going to capture your queen. And what do you do with your queen now? Because again, the e5 square is controlled with the rook, the d4 square is controlled with the white queen, and Tal basically is forcing David to go into a undesirable variation here, which David, of course, chooses. Better for David was to go queen g7, trying to go a bit passive but staying close to the black king. And why I'm saying that because this position is actually too much poisonous, and you will realize why David lost this game. So Bronston plays queen captures on b2 here, and he grabs a pawn. He also gets access to this last rank, but the main problem is this queen is now too much far away from the black king, and Tal exactly takes advantage here. So again, this is one of the moments in the game where I would like to you guys to pause the video and guess the best move for Tal, and it's one of the you know top engine recommendations in this particular position. So feel free to pause the video here. For those who have found it, congratulations. You are really now mastering tactics day by day. And for those who want to enjoy the show, it's knight to g6 with a check. Tal sacrifices the knight. And what do you have here? What if black takes? If black takes the knight, then comes queen to f6 with a check. Again, if black goes king g8, simply rook e8 check. Rook f8 and rook captures on f8 will be a nice little checkmate here. So, of course, you can't go king g8, and if you go block with the rook to h7, then the queen gets access to the f8 square, and after queen f8, it's a nice little checkmate with the black queen still on the board. So, of course, the knight cannot be taken here. That is why this knight is poisoned. So, knight g6 check, and Brunson plays king to g7. He doesn't take the knight, but now Tal plays knight to h4. And, well, what is Tal's plan? Tal says, well, now the rook is free to access the h6 square, and now my plan is simple. Simply queen h6 check, followed by rook e8 checkmate. So, how do we stop here? There is no way to stop. I mean, there are multiple threats. There is queen g5 check, there is queen h6 check, and there is no practical way to stop here. Constance tries king to f8 here, trying to run away with his king, sorry. But Tal plays the move queen g5 now, threatening queen g, not queen g7, sorry. Now going for the complete control of the g file, and the rook controls the e file, so the king is completely trapped on the f8 square. Now Bronston has only one choice, that is either to go start checking on the last rank, but that is not actually going to work because anyways the king is going to escape slowly and steadily. The knight comes in between and the queen and the rook are totally in control of the black king. So Brunson tries queen to d4 check here. He says, well, okay, now one last try. If Tal blunders king h1, then simply queen d1 check, and it's game over for Mikhail Tal. But when Tal, his master of tactics himself, is not going to fall into such minor tactic of David, he plays the move king to f1, and now David doesn't have any good plan. If queen d1 checks, simply rook to e1, and after that, the white king is out of checks. White still has a plan of going queen d8 check, and that will be the game for Mikhail Tal. So again, after king to f1, David realizes it. He plays bishop to c8 now, and he comes up with a. This is a very tricky idea for David here. Well, if Tal goes queen d8 check, which Tal can go here, David is going to play king to g7, and he says, well, okay, now you can take the bishop, but now I'm going to take your knight. So if queen captures on c8, queen captures on h4, and now it is black who is on that attack because suddenly the white king is pretty more unsafe. The f5 pawn is hanging, the queen f4 check can be a plan, queen captures on h2, and there are multiple threats from black. So white king is certainly unsafe here. Well, Tal doesn't want to go here because again, if Tal has to react, Tal's rook is under attack, but Tal's idea is not to go in this queen d8 check variation. So Tal chooses the absolute best move again. Tal plays knight to g6 with a check. And Tal says, well, the rook is covering the e file, so the king cannot step in the e file. And if you step on the g file, then comes knight e7 with a double check. Anywhere you go on h8 or f8, queen g8 on the next move is going to be a checkmate soon. Let's say queen h8, queen to g8 is going to be a checkmate. So that is the poison of the position. So the king cannot move, not on the e file, not on the g file. So David captures the knight, but now comes again much more brilliant stuff from Mikhail Tal. Queen h6 check is what many players can play, but the queen is going to block it. So Tal plays queen to d8 with the check, and this is just game over. And what do you do as black here? You have only one move, king to g7, and after rook g6 check, David just resigned the game because there is king h7 and queen g8 with a checkmate. Again, all these pieces just keep staring at the black king, getting checkmated and slaughtered by the pieces. So yeah, this was one more brilliant stuff from Mikhail Tal, and the way he attacked, the way he placed his pieces on active squares, and just busted open the Black King's position. This is just marvelous to see, especially the rookie 7 point where we saw. If we go back to the moment, just let me go back to that moment where he played rookie 7. Just a minute. Yeah, here before this. Yeah. So not trading of pieces here like this, just playing with absolute positional mindset and positional understanding. Rook e7 is the best move here. And after rook captures, knight captures, well, after king h8, black was in white was in complete control. Sorry, because black's position is not terrible, but it's passive. And the most blunders happen from humans in a passive position because usually human likes to play actively, and when he's forced to play in a box in a passive position, it becomes really dangerous for him to sustain that position for longer amount of time. So this was the game again. David Bronstein versus Mikhail Tal, and Tal completely outplayed Bronstein with the white pieces. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do stay tuned with our channel. Do subscribe our channel and stay tuned with this particular series of Brilliancies by Mikhail Tal. And I will be back in the next episode with one more tactical brilliancy of Mikhail Tal. And let's enjoy that in the next episode.